Hello, GrrCON. Woo! We having a good time? This is the best speaking slot because I think like all the free beer's done. Everyone's coming in. They want to like just going to hang out and chill. It'll be great. I am Wolf Goerlic. I am presenting to you today on a talk I call Inhumane. The concept is how can we make security a little bit easier for our users? How can we make it a lot more problematic for our red team and our criminals? This is me. I'm now at Duo, so big change since I was on stage last year with you guys. Great company. I get to work with some very senior people. We tackle only the most important issues. I'd like to share with you guys a photo of my team. We look something like this. I'm the one on the right. You know, you always wonder what the right term is, right? Like a flock of birds, a school of fish. We've decided this is called a snooze of CISOs. If anyone's wondering, I'm trying to make that a thing. Please help me make that a thing. With that, let's talk about what the problem is. Because that's what we're trying to solve, right? You're always in these talks, you want to solve a problem. What is the fundamental problem? The problem is security happens when mankind meets the machine. We build a machine and the machine is beautiful and pristine. And we're like, this is beautiful. This is wonderful. And then somebody has this idea of letting users in. Why? And we know the fundamental problems like, okay, there's phishing and everyone's going to click on links and they're going to get their email box popped. And there's some great statistics about the compromised amount of money that can be made on this. It's now more than bank heists. Criminals are making more on bank heists and business email compromises, which I hate because what a lame movie that's going to be for our kids, right? Like anyone seen like Old Man and the Gun? Robert Redford? Anyone? No? People are like, no, I'm not even going to admit it. Okay, so this is old guy. He's robbing a bank. And it's great. I'm like, that's my goal. I want to graduate, retire. I want to rob banks for a living. Our poor kids are going to be like, one day I'll be on a movie where I talk about phishing. That's sad, folks. We need to fix this. And we also know about devs. Oh, our devs. Software development, writing all that code that makes everything vulnerable. This is my fundamental favorite picture of software dev, because it's like the third row in Google, and it actually has SQL injection right there, if you see it. It's like, God. And we know we keep making the same problems over and over again. GrrCON has a report out that they produce every year. They produced it for 10 years. This is the 10th year they put it out. It was, I think, year 4 when I'm like, I give up. I'm never going to talk OWASP 10 again because no one's listening. And this year, they actually summed up the percentage of errors found in new apps. Right? New apps, first time someone has written some code, they've created this beautiful machine, and they submit it to GrrCON for scanning. GrrCON then checks for the errors. This is the prevalence rate of those errors. Almost like flat for SQL injection. We just do it again and again and again, 24%. Right? We got a little bit better on some things, but a whole lot worse in the information leakage. And we just keep creating these errors as developers again and again and again. Developers are great. Developers are like the ultimate job security for pen testers. So if you're a dev, thank you. And I was a dev, so I get it. No one tells you to write good code. You're like, here, copy this template. And the template sucks. And now you get SQL injection everywhere. But we can't just blame the developers, right? What about our IT friends? Our friends in IT who are racking and stacking on the front lines of building the machines, putting in our data centers or moving into the cloud. We got to talking, Alyssa and I'm like, how often are these mistakes happening? She goes, all the time. And so I look into Verizon data breach report, and sure enough, they're like, yeah, 21% of the time a breach occurs is because an IT guy made an error. Right? You know, like every time you hear a bell ring, an angel gets its wings. Every time an IT guy closes a ticket, Our red team gets a fun opportunity. I'm like, this is terrible. So I'm talking to Alyssa, and I'm like, how often does this occur, though? How often is this a problem? She goes, well, we've got stats that shows this problem occurs all the time. I'm like, okay, but how often? So she went back and charted this for us. Take a photo of this. Go check out this link. She blogged on Alyssa Miller. But check it out. 40% of the findings in their pen tests, again and again and again, for 3 years, 40%, an IT guy closed a ticket. And now we have vulnerabilities. So that's kind of a problem. And then the other problem is that we're not even in our data centers anymore, right? We're not even at our desks. I've got an iPhone. I'm sure a lot of you guys have iPhones or Androids. I love my iPhone. I don't like one thing about the iPhone. Anyone like screen time? You guys like screen time? It's kind of cool. It shows you what. It sucks. I'm telling you why it sucks. Because I want it to lie to me, you know? Like, seriously, I love those snack packs. It's like 60 calories. And you're like, awesome. Like, 10 servings per package. I'm like, I'm not doing that math. I had 60 calories. Screen time tells me I'm on my phone 10 hours a day. I don't think that's right. I think it's like 9 minutes. I'm sure there's some error there per serving size. But I know I'm not alone. We're all on our phones all the time. We're not on desktops anymore. And I look at my kids. My daughter's 19. My wife's son is 19. And they do almost all their homework on their computer. Her son will do it all on his phone. I'm sorry, on their phone, not on the computer. Her son will do it all on his phone over text messages, copy and paste those into a web portal, and then there's my paper. Like, wow, text it in. I love that. Of course, that means there's no security, right? So we're all on phones. And if we're not on phone, or when we're on phones, we're all accessing apps. Because everything is in the freaking cloud today. I love the cloud. The cloud's awesome. Did you guys, a few of you are in here for the cloud password talk? For like $500, you can crack everyone's passwords. I'm like, that's awesome. Give me $500. I'll crack a password. It's great. Let's do it. What's interesting, though, is now the average enterprise uses 1,427 cloud apps. Average person is using 36, most of those off their phone. They also surveyed CIOs to say, hey, how many cloud apps do you guys care about and secure? The average was 40. 40! We got thousands of apps. And they're like, oh, we care about the 40 ones. Okay, that's a problem. So there's some changes around. And then there's some other words guys might hear, like DevOps and IoT. I'll give you my definition. You guys want to hear my definition? Yeah, thank you. Because everyone wants to know what DevOps is. They're like, what is DevOps, Wolf? I'm like, I will define DevOps for you. I'll give you 2 definitions for DevOps. Failing faster and failing at scale. Thank you. Those 40% changes that we screw up that the red team finds, let's automate those so we can push those out everywhere. It'll be great. And then let's let the developers push those buttons, and oh, by the way, let them write the code where 1 in 4 times they got SQL injection. And we'll put that code in Jenkins. Yeah. Fail faster, fail at scale. Then we include IoT, which is my new favorite thing. It's not really new, but my definition of IoT, failing on new things and failing in new places. Right? Let's put that same code in a device that's monitoring my heart in the hospital. Oh yeah! Please. And tell me it's segmented with a network with any connections. Woo! I'm excited. So we've got problems. And the CISOs are not doing themselves any favors, because the CISOs go, that's out of scope. That's out of scope. I'm not going to talk about the cloud. I was doing an audit, and this was like 5 weeks into a 6-week audit, and I was like, and how do you do asset management, and do you have multi-factor, do you patch? All the boring audit questions, right? We all hate audits. I don't like doing them either when I was doing them. And the guy in the room is like answering, and finally he stops, and he turns to CISO, he goes, but does this apply to like our Azure and AWS environments? And there's this long pause, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. And the CISO turns and goes, get out! He's like, that's out of scope. You leave right now. They had to do like walk of shame back to the cube. Like, I'm sorry, I brought up the cloud. They turned to me. The CISO's like, you better not put that in report. We are not in the cloud. I later found out 2/3 of their development efforts are all DevOps in the cloud. But that's out of scope. That's out of scope. So we got problems, right? Security happens where mankind meets the machine. And the fundamental nature of InfoSec has changed. We don't control everything anymore. That's the problem. It used to be great when we did. Well, it wasn't great. I'm lying. We had to argue people like to put firewalls on and antivirus. That was the first 10 years of my career. So, but trust me, guys and kids, it was a kinder, gentler age. But now security is not what we control. Security is what they do. So what I've been thinking a lot about is how do we get people to do the right thing? And if we don't like them, if we want to mess with them, if they're the red team or the criminals or the bad guys, how do we make it an inhumane nightmare for them? I've been looking a lot at design, so a lot of this talk will be about industrial design. I'd encourage you guys to do the same. I'd love to hear your feedback afterwards because I'm spending a lot of time looking at this and looking at this from a new angle, and I'd love to hear your perspectives. That's the problem, though. 2, anyone know where we are? I mean, not like someone's like, GrrCON. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's good. No, but I mean like the ability to know where you're at and where you're going. I'd love to make like a Maleficent reference here, but try as I may, I couldn't. So, see the movie. It should be Joker. Moana, though. Moana was a cool movie. And it has something to do with cybersecurity. Give me 2 minutes and I'll prove it to you. So, in Moana, she's got this whole thing. She's just like on this island. She wants to go free. There's this great musical interlude. I would sing it to you, but everyone would leave right away, and you guys would complain to Egg Drop X. I won't do that. But I also encourage you to listen to that music. It pumps me up. So, she finds her way, though, right? She sticks her hand in the water. She does the finger to the stars. She does all this stuff, and she rediscovers wayfinding. What's fascinating about that is the Polynesians. The Polynesians, where a lot of the story was built, the Polynesians are expert wayfinders. They're expert wayfinders. They can tell. And they've done studies where they'll blindfold them, they'll take them out in the middle of the islands, and they'll look at the water. The water that you and I would look at is just flat. I don't know where it is. I'm lost. I'm lost like turning left out of a parking lot. So don't use me as an example. But Polynesians will look at it and go, oh, we just need to go that way to that island, that way to that island. It turns out there's wave patterns and refraction that happens off the islands that creates unique patterns that these people are able to find their way. Wayfinding, the ability to know where you're at. Wayfinding is a very human skill, something we're all have innate ability to do it, whether you're a Polynesian or you're Eskimo looking another way to snow, or you're an office worker faced with all the technology that we put in their way to get their job done. They will find a way, right? There may be a Disney song about it, probably not, it's an office space, but that might be a good movie if anyone wants to write it down. Wayfinding is a way and science of looking at how people find their way through these things. Now, this has 2 immediate applications for what we're talking about. One is the idea that we could take a business flow and say, hey, how do you do your job? Well, I log into here, I copy files over here, I do this other thing, this is my hiring process. Do I approve it or do I not? And by the way, you guys got the idea, I'm not going to bore you with that. But my point is, you could do some workflow analysis and figure out how people are finding their way through that process. I know CISO did this with his hiring process and discovered that it was PII everywhere. They were faxing stuff in 2018. I'm like, why are you faxing? They were copying it. There was a shred bin and people weren't shredding. Every security nightmare you may imagine. And they're like, why are you doing all this? And the HR person's like, well, I never can get a business case to get a new system in. So, well, what if I helped you on the security side? And together they built a business case and redid their entire process to put in an HR system and automate and put encryption and do all the fancy stuff that we all do now when you go to get a job. We're not scanning in our driver's license anymore. We're going to a website. So you can do this on the workflow side. You can also do this on the attack side, looking at attack paths, right? How do the criminals come in? How do they find their way? What are they doing? Wayfinding. Wayfinding, the concept of finding your way and knowing where you're at and how you get there and how you get back. Wayfinding is an important part of this conversation because we want to make wayfinding very easy for our users so they follow the path that we set for them and don't get creative because creative people are scary. We also want to make it very hard for the criminals so when they're following that path, maybe we trip them. Maybe we circle them back. Maybe we get them lost. Second part of this is choice architecture. Read about it on Wikipedia if you want to. It's an interesting idea of setting good defaults. So 40% of the time you're pushing out IT that's vulnerable. Why can't we set better defaults so that we can get ahead of that problem? So we can make sure that when you push it out, it's in a secure state. Right? Choice architecture, setting up choices so that people make the right choices for more secure environments. And if you give me 1 second, we're going to go out and go back into this, because none of my notes are showing up. All right, so 14 minutes in, I haven't used any of my speaker notes for whatever that counts for. Woo. Yeah, people are like, yeah, so what? Thank you. The half-hearted clap, I appreciate it. Like that slow, like golf clap, that's good, that's good. All right, moving forward, we're going to look at this along 3 things, right? Usability, manageability, and defensibility. Defensibility is protecting against criminals. Usability is getting users to do what we want and keep buying in. And manageability is, for a lot of us, making our lives easier. All right. So, 3. My speaker notes just will not show up, so I'm going to just keep going. That's good. Hello, how's it going? I'm on this talk. He keeps going out. His clicker's not working. Yeah, I'll call you back. All right. So I was doing this project with my team, previous job, and they're like, all right, we have these audit files for you. Again, audit, please. Oh my goodness. Don't ever get stuck with that. It's good. It's good. I'm just still recovering from it. So we're doing this assessment. We're helping them. And they're like, yeah, you need to do 2FA. I'm like, no problem. I love 2FA, right? 2FA is great. We should all do a 2FA. They're like, here's this token. I'm like, oh my God. Really? It's the 90s again. But then it got better. They're like, okay, so we need you to log into this interface for our VPN because we haven't upgraded it. And it's kind of weird. So the first time you log in, you use your username and password. The next time you log in, you use your username and the first 4 characters, your password, and whatever pins on that RSA token. Now, anyone who knows passwords in here is going, wait a minute. You are not hashing if you got 4 characters, those passwords keyed up. Thank you. That's what I said. They didn't care. And oh, by the way, sometimes it may tell you incorrect password. Don't worry about that. Just do it again. I'm like, which part? And they're like, I don't know. Whichever works. Groovy. Groovy. And then once we're in, so everyone got their own RSA token. Good. Right? Segregation duties, individual accounts. Everyone got their own password. Good. Okay. Passwords are not hashed. We'll gloss over that. But then they're like, okay, once you're in, use this netuse command. I'm like, that netuse command has the password in it. They're like, yeah, we got a shared account for your company. No. Okay, so then, for a lot of us who are road warriors, as we know, you're in a coffee shop, you're at a conference venue, you're in a hotel, and now you're net using to a folder trying to access files. If it works, if it doesn't, the files are not there. And then there's version history problems, which is great, because they're like, oh, you said we didn't have this control, but we do. I'm like, I was using the file on the thing. They're like, well, there's a new file. I'm like, well, when was there a new file? I don't know. Relatively recently? Like, okay, good. So this entire smack my forehead moment, and it really drove home to me, oh my goodness, if we could just sit in the seat of our users every once in a while and feel the pain that they were feeling. So it's paramount for security officers, for security managers, for anyone putting into control, really, to design experience and design workflow. Because if you don't, as William Gibson once said, William Gibson, made most famous by hacking the Gibson, right? Hack the planet. Said, the street will find its own use for things. Whatever the technology is, people find creative ways of using it. Even if it's something you like. Again, MFA. I love MFA. This story comes from the MySec Slack channel, by the way. If you're not in the MySec Slack channel and you're in Michigan, check it out. So this university installs Duo. They push out Duo to everywhere. There's this prof, and the prof's trying to teach the class. And he's using the software that only has like 1 license. I don't know why. So what the prof does, he goes up to the board and he writes the username and password. His university username and password on the board with the URL to the tool. And people are like, what are you doing? He's like, yeah, well, I know if you're like in class, when my Duo says where you're coming from, I know you're like right next to me, so I'll just click approve. I'm like, you gave everyone your username and password? They're like, yeah. Because if the Duo doesn't say it's in the room, I'll just say deny. Thank you for whoever said, oh my gosh. I had a little bit stronger reaction. There was bourbon involved. So, anyways, People find their own use for technology, right? Flashing back to my story where we had this big problem of a client with all these files. I'm sitting there and I'm like, this sucks. And one of my guys, he's a problem solver. He is excited. No matter what's going on, I've got 6 texts in the morning before I go on site about everything you might imagine. This guy is the most energetic puppy of a security analyst I've ever worked for. He is raring to go. And he's like, I solved the problem. I'm like, you did? He goes, yes, we've got this new share. Here's where you get all the files. And it was online. It was fast. And I didn't have to worry about anything. And he used my username. I'm like, this is great. And I was excited. And we worked for a few weeks off that. And then I got the call. They're like, how did you do that recent one? I'm like, oh, well, I used the portal. And they're like, portal? I go, yeah, the online version of the files. Online version of the files? Yeah. What online version of the files? And it was at that point we realized that we had copied all this very sensitive information that they wrapped around an MFA and a file share and usernames and passwords to get into the secure bastion. And we had copied it out into a public location so we could share the files and do the job. Like, So that's the story of how I broke the security. But that's what people do, right? If it sucks, we're going to work around it, especially if we're hackers. So first thing we need to do is minimize the number of steps. Whatever we're having our users do, have them do less. I did another project. They're like, oh, we're going to share files with you, and we need MFA. I'm like, oh my God, kill me. Like, it's on Box. I'm like, all right, keep talking. I like you so far. Like, and you can use their Duo. I'm like, all right, this is good. And oh, by the way, there's version control. I'm like, you are the best client ever, and you already passed. So whatever it is, no, I didn't do that. But you see my point. So, rule number 1 for users, minimize the steps. And then we have to get people to follow the steps. And a lot of times they won't. If it's weird, if it's unusual, they won't. So, as an example, has nothing to do with security, but there are these great cards, and I can give them to you or take a photo or I'll give you a slide. Jamie Tomasello and Famida Rashid made this. These are mocktails, second factor, red team Ricky, detection response, all the password. Because we all go to these conferences and we drink a lot. Unless you don't drink, and then you're like, it just feels weird, right? So they have these mocktails and you can make them. Now as they're building out these cards, they realized bartenders weren't wanting to do that. They're like, oh, we don't have time. Or I don't know how to make that. So if I zoom on the card, there's one part I want you to look at because it's paramount and important to security. This part down the bottom, right? Second factor. And each one of these cards, it says it's based on something. This one's based on a mojito. Just this line on these cards. You say, hey, this is based on a mojito. Can you make this for me? Their acceptance rate of bartenders who would do it jumped up 20 times. It's like, oh, like a mojito? Okay, I got that. Before, they're like, you want me to make a second factor? Don't have time for that, don't know what that is. By making the steps familiar, we get buy-in and we get people to do what we want. Right? So we need to make fewer steps, and we need to make the steps familiar, repeatable, so people are comfortable, so they do what they need to do. And let's talk a little bit about more of those tokens. One more horror story. One more scary story to keep you guys up all night. Back to RSA tokens. I was a security officer at a financial services firm. That's the full stop right there. Everyone's like, oh, no. I was implementing a vulnerability management and we're scanning our network. And at the time, every single app vendor, I'm on New York Stock Exchange, I'm on, the NASDAQ, I'm on wherever, I'm on the FTSE, I run this app, I run that app. Every one of these apps, every one of our partners sent us an RSA token. So everyone would have 1 million RSA tokens. Much like the university, you paid for extra licenses. So oftentimes there's a cost advantage to only have one person having the license, having the account. Keep that in the back of your mind. So I'm scanning my network and I'm doing asset inventory because that's what security professionals do. So I'm doing asset inventory and I come across this IP address. I'm like, this is weird. This isn't Windows. This is Linux. This is weird. What is this? And I'm probing and I'm figuring it out. And I'm on IRC. I'm like, hey, you want to see this? I'm like, oh, check this out. I'm like, I try that out. And sure enough, it was a commercial grade from Best Buy webcam. Like, why is there a webcam on my network? Like, if only I knew the password was the default. Okay, good. So I get in this password, get in this webcam, and the head trader had set up a whiteboard, And, well, not him, his admin. His admin very carefully labeled all the RSA tokens, placed them down with the vendor, the username, the password. Perfect. On my network with a default username and password. Awesome. Great solution for them, right? They just saved a lot of money, made their lives easier. Just need to teach people how to access the webcam. Boom, you're in. We gotta watch the friction between the steps too. So we need to make it easy, we need to reduce the steps, and we need to make sure there's very little friction between them. Because, number one rule here is creative constraints. Creative constraints is this fantastic aspect of psychology that says the more you're constrained, the more creative you are. Different way of saying it is the more security controls we put in place, the more steps we make them take, the more creative they become, the more they become hackers, the more they work around us, the more they stick up whiteboards and copy files, and everything else that keeps us all up at night. If you just make it easier, things will be better. Case study of that. So Chrome got rid of the network API, right? So they got rid of it. Used to be able to make calls and do all sorts of cool stuff with it. And they got rid of the MPAI. So all of a sudden a bunch of companies are like, well, wait, how do I do what I need to do? Including Dual, who had a listener, did this with the device health. Like, what's the patching status on my device? You used to be able to get that, now you can't. So Chrome removes it. So Trend Micro's like, hey, no problem. I'll create a listener for my API that runs in the box. And then Logitech did the same thing. I'll create a little web service that runs on my box for my mouse. Don't quite get why you need a web service for a mouse, but Logitech, thank you. And then Microtorrent's like, you guys are awesome. We're having the same problem. We'll create a web service that runs in the box that allows us to know when torrents come in. Okay? Nothing sketch about that. And then Zoom does the same thing. This was a vulnerability that hit us all this summer when people were recognizing that these web services on Macs were incredibly vulnerable. And when you uninstalled Zoom, it left the web service there in a vulnerable state. But your box looked clean, right? When there's constraints, people get creative, and we don't want them to be creative. So we need to look at human-centered design for this. Look at the blend of psychology and technology. Look at ways to be empathetic and kind. Look at ways to increase speed. FedRAMP did this very well. FedRAMP used to spend tons and tons of time auditing internally government websites, and it would be anywhere from a 12-month to a 2-year process to get your findings and fix them and remediate them and everything. One of the leads of that program stopped and said, wait a minute, we're wasting too much time here. There's got to be a better way. They pulled their leads off for about 6 months or 6 weeks, and they came up with a template that was compliant out of the box and cut that process from 12 months to 24 months down to about 6. And all of a sudden everyone wanted to get secure because I can go live, I can go fast with a good default. So the usability side is designed for usability, right? Reduce the friction, reduce the effort, and make it all possible for the users so they do not get creative. 4, tall walls and deep moats can keep the zombies out. I've talked a lot at GrrCON about my idea about security being bells, right, that ring when people walk across them. And I used to tell this story, I don't think I've ever told on this stage, about the time I implemented a CIS control. I love CIS controls, love them. I was doing tabletops, we were implementing them. And one of them was block when people have a disabled account and log in, that should be alerted on, because obviously that means they're trying to get back in the network. So we recognized that was a problem. We put that in place, and we're piping everything into IBM QRadar, into the SIM. And all these alerts were going in. This was a Thursday. I thought it was awesome. We tested it. Life was good. Friday I had off. Monday I had off. Tuesday I come in, and my alerts are through the roof. They're through the roof. And I learned that we had fired somebody and disabled their VPN, but when they disabled the VPN, they disabled it wrong, so it was still connected. There was a bug when you delete instead of disabled, so they're still connected, and they had spent the entire weekend probing around my network trying to log in and get stuff before they had to return their computer on Monday. And I was livid. I went to my guy, I'm like, monitoring guy, why didn't you catch this? Why didn't you, raise the alarm? Why didn't you, say anything? This was 4 days and tons of alerts and tons of monitoring. And he looks me in the eye and he goes, You're just being Wolf. Wolf does Wolf. And then I get alerts. I figure it was just you fucking around. I'm like, thanks. And so I told this story many times over the years as like the monitoring people should like dig in. And I told it at a user group, and this guy raises his hand. He goes, yeah, but how many monitorings were you actually doing? How many alerts were they getting? I'm like, oh, well, like thousands. And like, well, what was your staff? I'm like, basically like him and an afternight guy. And they're like, but I'm like, no, you were not putting this on me. That was that guy. My point here is that fatigued security teams are ineffective security teams, right? And on the manageability side, we ask SOC people, NOC people, all of us in this room to do way too much. So I think we need to use the same concept of human-centered design to make things easier. Now you may say, oh, well, you need a single pane of glass. No one's sick of the term single pane of glass? It's just me? Okay. Yes. Hell yes. So, single pane of glass for single pane of glass, the drinking game. Brought to you by GrrCON. I actually looked at the Google Trends of this, and I think maybe we're at peak single pane of glass, because it does seem to be dipping, but it doesn't get any better. Obviously, we know there is no single pane of glass. You talk to any security person, they're like, yeah, I absolutely have a single pane of glass. I got my email that tells me the alert, and then I jump into this console that says I've got the problem, and then I go back to this to figure out what it is, and then I go down to here to block it, and then I go up to here because I realize that you know what I mean? It's terrible. It really is terrible. Single pane of glass. Blech. So, we need to do something better than that. Part of this is alignment. There's this concept of industrial design about aligning the work so that the position of the steps make more sense. So our tools need better APIs. Our interfaces need better interaction for SOAR and for EDR and those sort of things. And we need to do something in a way that when we're wayfinding as security professionals, we're not jumping around and doing a billion different tools. And find ways to unify what we're doing using the principle of unity so that these elements work together. So that we're on a standard API, right? So we're doing things across a consistent way. So there's this concept of the double diamond model in design. And this is where I think a lot of SOC people get stuck. Because we hear all the time it takes 180 days to find a breach. Because on the first problem, do we have a problem? Where is it? Go through this interface, go through the interface, argue a lot, right? And we go through this divergence to convergence, so we figure out what the problem is, and then we got to clean it up. That's another one they almost never tell you the stats on. It's usually like 60 to 70 days a breach remains in the environment once it's found. Because we're going through the same cycle, right? Where's the problem? What do I need to do? How do I clean it up? Is it cleaned up? I'm sure it is. Well, why is it still on my network? You get the idea. So, forget single panes of glass. We end up spending a ton of time jumping through a bunch of interfaces through this. And we need to find a better way to communicate this stuff to our SOC. It's a company I work with, or used to work with, and I'm good friends with their CISO, and I love their SOC. It's a global SOC. It's everything I would have ever wanted back in the day. It's got all the great monitors and everything. It's also running IBM Curator. This is not commercials for IBM Curator, it's just what I ran and what they ran. But what's interesting is, usually you go into SOCs and you get those pew maps, right? This is what's going on. It's all exciting. And we got great visualizations. And look, there's the matrix rain. So clearly we are about to have something go down. It's about that time when you got the matrix rain, someone brings you in a bowl of noodles, and then you fight the bad guys. However, what they did was they actually simplified the entire design to a 4x4 grid check engine light style. His entire monitoring is 4x4 grid. Those are the use cases for specific personas that happen regularly. If those light up, the entire SOC focuses on that job till it gets that job done. Very different from how most of us set up our SOCs, right? Very poised, very focused. So from a defense perspective, I think we need to design for manageability, which we don't oftentimes do. For every addition, we need a subtraction. Every time we ask our team to do more, we need to take something out or collapse a use case. Maybe by focusing on what the real risks are, what we see all the time. And find ways to decrease the cognitive load by unifying the steps. Okay, 5. Inhumane. It's about time we got to the inhumane part of this talk. You guys sick about everything else? We're ready to move on? Good. All right, back to wayfinding and threat modeling. how we can use human-centered design to make inhumane nightmares. First, we need to create adversarial personas, right? Developers, awesome, they get this. There's a persona. We're developing for the persona. Red team usually doesn't, or blue team usually doesn't. A lot of times I'm having a conversation, and it'll go something like this. You know what, we really should do something about password spraying. Like, why should we do something about password spraying? Well, because that's a thing, and we got a username and password field in there. Someone's going to password spray. And they're like, no, but you don't understand. Like, Fancy Bear Red APT 247 has figured out ways to get around password spraying by doing one ping, single pane of glass attacks through a... I'm like, I don't care. Most people are running software. So, if we could start with the idea of doing personas. Here's mine. Use yours. I don't care. But I like to name the monsters, right? The script kiddies, we know the script kiddies. These are the ones who are running random automation software against you all the time. Insider threats, the lone actors, oftentimes driven by revenge or espionage or paid. Did you guys see the AT&T one? AT&T help desk, who had full privileges to install and remove software on people, were paid about $7 million over 2 years, these help desk people, to install malicious software for a nation state. Insider threat. The hacktivists, obviously, anonymous is not so much a big deal anymore, but I spent a lot of time worrying about anonymous back in the day, back at the financial services firm. Cyber criminals, these are the ones, of course, that are most motivated because they make money off us. They're using automation, but in a very targeted fashion. We know who you are. We're not just spraying and paying and doing a showdown attack. Or, of course, our nation state. So step one is create personas. What are the personas in your environment, in your organization, that are most likely to come at you? How do you know? Hopefully with good threat intel, hopefully with good monitoring, hopefully with good feedback that says, last time we saw 5 attacks, and those 5 attacks, 4 of them were automated malware, and 1 of them was screwing around. Okay, great. But we need to plan for. By using personas, we can really narrow in on what those small set of things are that we're going to ask the team to protect us against. All right, so create adversarial personas, and then increase the steps for criminals, right? We need to actually do some threat modeling. However we do threat modeling, doesn't matter. I don't care if it's a kill chain, or attack path, or threat end, whatever it is. But map out the steps the criminals take to your environment consistently for that given persona. And do so with some common stuff. There was a great talk on an attack MITRE framework at GrrCON that did not happen. I was bummed because I was excited about it. Earlier today, anyone in the room like waiting for it? Yeah, good, not just me. But I'm fascinated with that because it tells you the real tactics and procedures that are being used and gives you a way to set up your monitoring and your defenses. If you guys haven't checked out the attack MITRE framework, do so. Then we need to increase the steps. How many steps? 10, 5, I don't know. We never knew until recently. The Verizon data breach report this year was fantastic. I was really excited. I was thrilled because they actually graphed it out for us. This is the number of steps that most attacks take. And you can see over here, this is the likelihood of attack, of success. So if you want to cut in half the likelihood of success for your criminals, make sure the common personas that you're tracking need to take 10 steps or more. Boom, done. Added a couple steps, boom, done. Now, you can say, where do I add steps, right? Where do I put that in? We'll get that in a minute. But we start with the persona, we do the threat model, and then we increase those steps. And the opposite of users, we make the steps unfamiliar. We've gotten really good with DevOps and IoT at having this idea of a monoculture, right? We have systems that are consistently built the exact same way. So once a criminal needs to find one way in, they just repeat it a bazillion times. Or wire into showdown and scan the network for this thing and repeat it a bazillion times. We need to take these nice pretty fields and make them a little creepy. Change things. Use a non-default build. Use a non-default port. Spice things up a little bit. Run things on a different drive letter. I used to run all my servers on M because they were metaframe, and you'd be surprised at how much malware that would break. Because the malware would be like, look for C, because people write programs the same way, right? Just like our developers are consistently writing bad code, I tell you, the malware guys are consistently making assumptions, and if you break those assumptions, it breaks the malware. Early days of ransomware, everyone was turning off VSS Writer. Why? Because one thing that it would do is it would make sure that VSS Writer was in a state where it was running and delete the backups. So the malware would go, I'm in your box. The ransomware would go, okay, good, now I'm going to delete VSS. And it would try and do VSS. And the writers didn't assume that anyone would actually turn it off, because who would do that? In the middle of the run, VSS was off, boom, ransomware is done, dead. How can we make those steps unfamiliar? And then we can start making things inhumane. We can do this in fun ways for the red team. DNS Princess's talk on breaking and entering was very exciting to me. I enjoyed that. It was earlier in this track. I am not DNS Princess at all. But when I went, I was working with this hospital, and it was like first floor foyer, security guards, locked door, then in the elevator, you can only hit certain buttons without swiping, then the elevator opened on the 5th door, and then there's another locked door, and another person who was an admin at that desk, and then we got into the conference room. Did that day one, they escorted me up, and I was talking to the CISO. I'm like, all right, good. Where's my badge to get in? He goes, oh, no. What do you mean, no? He goes, I want to make this interesting. So what does that mean? He goes, well, you're here for 5 days. You need to break into the building every day. That was wrong, right? That's rude. You better believe the next time I'm a security officer, I'm going to do that to the next guy. That cut into my audit time. Now, mind you, by Friday I was bringing donuts and I made friends with the security guard and everything's good. But the first couple days, people, it sucked. So you start thinking about that, right? Who's the persona and how can you add some time to them? The other one, and this is a classic, it doesn't work anymore, I'm so bummed. But we used to, use backtrack, right? Cali, before it was cool, real men use never mind. But the nice thing about backtrack is the default password was Tor and root was the username, and also it had a predictable MAC address, and also if you're scanning your network, well, you could see that MAC address, and also if you're scanning your network and you can see that MAC address SSH was open, and also you could write a cool script that whenever it saw that, it executed a shutdown command. I loved it when my pen test team sent me a newbie and he lost 2 days out of a 5-day assessment going, why does my backtrack keep shutting down, dude? And you'd watch him on the forums like, has anyone seen backtrack shutting down? I'm like, run out the clock, right? Run out the clock. These are steps that you can introduce that aggravate and frustrate the offensive testing side. But if you notice, none of these impact users. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. We need to make it inhumane, but we also need to make it invisible. We need to make it absolutely invisible to the users. Another fun way to do that, my personal favorite, is whitelisting. Right? Whitelist the good. Do it on your computers. Do it on your DNS. Do it on your network. So only things that are authenticated can plug in your networks. And someone's probably thinking like, Wolf, weren't you at GrrCON like 2 years ago, like showing us how you could defeat app blocker? Yes, but hear me out, guys. Can a determined attacker get around this? Absolutely. Is this made for that persona? No. This is made for the stupid malware that we're all downloading because everyone's clicking on links because we're all in a hurry, right? Think about what your persona is. An app blocker can clean a lot of that stuff off. Good DNS like Umbrella or OpenDNS can clean a lot of that stuff off. Could a determined attacker change stuff? Yes. If you guys watch Dave Kennedy, he will add 2 carrots into his command prompt and get around all our commands, right? Not hiring Dave Kennedy. So whitelisting. Another one is adding steps across a given attack path. Lots of people moved to Office 365, and in the move to Office 365, not enough people put in MFA. So, by the way, if you're not using MFA in Office 365, please do. It cuts down the account takeovers by like 99%. I understand that adds a step to the users. Find some other place to save them a step and make their lives easier. But this malware is pretty cool. It gets in, creates all these forwarding rules, and now, my box is compromised, and the criminal is emailing my box, hey, I need you to change your invoice. And my box sees that, and the rule processes it, forwards on to the accountant, and the accountant's like, Well, man, that's not a fish. It clearly came from Wolf. Yeah, everything looks all right. Okay, I'll do that. And he replies back, and it comes to my box, and my box is a rule, and it forwards it out to the criminal, and then they're able to basically proxy in an environment, right? Sure, a lot of people have seen this. This hit the automotive industry for the past 2 years incredibly hard as people have been funneling money out of organizations. We know the attack path. Add monitoring in Office 365 to allow you to know when someone sets up a forwarding rule. And then investigate. You're not preventing it, so the user has time to, do whatever they need to do, and you can investigate it. But at the same time, these criminals usually don't act for another 1 or 2 days. So if you can get in there within 8 hours and say, hey, what happened? And remove it, boom, you're clean. Right? Simple monitoring rule across the attack path. Honey tokens, I'm a big fan of. The idea of saying, here's a port on my network. Another thing I used to do is in my network, I would have a couple ports that were running on a SQL server or a 3389 RDP server that no one would ever connect to because they weren't anything real. But if it did connect, the alert went to my IBM QRadar, by the way, to my alert fatigue team, so we'll bear that in mind. But then people knew something was going on. Files in a file server that people should never read, cleverly named things like, employee salary, those sort of stuff. Now the counter is that, well, everyone's already busy. Remember what I said earlier, every time you add something, remove something. Only do this if you know your persona is following a path and you're putting it in their way so you can detect them. Thresholds is another one. We did this pen test, and it was driving my team nuts because they kept getting 404s, right, and 500s. Obviously, you're scanning this server. That makes sense. You're doing SQL, and you're probing for errors. That makes sense. You get these errors, right? But then, after 400, 500, they would stop being able to talk to it for 15 minutes. And when you're a pen tester and you've got it all in your head, and you're like right there, if you stop a pen tester for 15, 20 minutes and they have to start over, they basically are back to ground one, right? You've completely ruined the day. You do that consistently over a day, you can wear out an attacker completely. So we're like, what the hell's going on? And the web service he's just all smiling. I'm like, what is going on? And he had Nginx set up, and he had a port rule that would block you if you had exceeded thresholds for 404s or 500s. If you exceed those thresholds, you're blocked, you're locked out for 15 minutes. Regular user goes, that's weird. A regular user should not be creating 100 404s. That's weird. But if they did, they go, oh, I can't get in the page. And what are they going to do? They're going to look at cats, look at Facebook, look at Twitter, grab a cup of coffee, come back, and their threshold is already timed out, and they're back in. Attackers, you've now completely wasted their threat. The idea here, in general, is this. We know that a guy starts out with tons of energy, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. And then as we drag the process out that they are having to follow to pen test, to break in, again, based on persona, to steal, to do whatever they're trying to do to monetize our environment. If we can just drag them out long enough, we run them down, we run out the clock, run down their battery, and we win. So we want to design for defensibility. We want to increase the friction on these paths. We want to increase the effort and make it incredibly hard in ways that are invisible to the user. 6, the wolf came to a gruesome end. I don't know that I like that. I should not have put that. We need to design better experiences. We have to design better. Users can be on their phone. They can be on 1,000 different apps. They can spin stuff up faster than we can in the blue team or in IT operations. And at the same time, IT operations is, 40% of the time causing errors. Our developers are 1 in 4 apps introducing SQL injection, and the rate goes higher for other types of flaws. And our users are clicking on whatever. We have to find ways to make it easier and simpler. And we have to look at this as wayfinding, choice architecture, and ways to design better experiences for them. For security control, I'm going to give you a 8-step process. You select a process prioritized by risk, right? What matters to my organization? You click the right button, not the wrong button. You identify control using a framework. You reduce the steps for the users, you reduce the friction, and you design it in a way that's not going to overrun your SOC. This is not easy. This is not easy. But it tackles directly one of the major issues of our day. Once you have that process in place, you increase the steps for the attackers. Attack MITRE framework is a good place to start and look. You look at different ways that you can give them better friction and make it harder on them. And step 8, something we almost never do, is you put in place metrics, right? Should you remove admin from every box? People say yes. Admin. People say no. How do we know? How do we know how many breaches have been caused because of an admin in our environment? If it's a lot, hell yes, I'm removing it. If it's not, why am I? When I talk about how oftentimes there are bugs and vulnerabilities in SQL code or issues in our system we stand up, do we know that? Do we know the rate our developers are writing bad code consistently via DevOps and on IoT devices? If we do, we want to jump in there and work to write it down. If we don't, we need to put those metrics in place so that we can have a good, tight feedback loop. And we need to be kind. This is actually a holdover from a Doctor Who version of this talk, but I just love this quote. Right? Always try to be kind. Always try to be nice, and never fail to be kind. I think kindness is the ultimate overlooked security control to our users. But don't be nice to the bad guys, right? We need to mess with them. Then in the security culture, we use those feedbacks to drive training. We incorporate the security into the job process training. Not this, let's look at security awareness once a year, click through the slide deck, click here, none of that. Give them small supplemental training. Here's what you need to do. Here's how to write a better app. Here's how to push out a stronger change. Here's how to make your day easier. Here's how to use whatever security control we're putting in. And oh, by the way, when you put this control in, I just saved you 3 steps off a task you do every day. And adjust the training content based on metrics, adjust the frequency based on the metrics, so we're getting them with the right message, and then drive the support, the use of that control up. Security culture, security awareness is important. We all know it's Security Awareness Month. Yes, everyone knows. We're all aware. We're all aware of our security awareness. All our users know what to do. I saw a survey that only like 20% of users at home are using MFA. I'm like, oh, you guys are killing me. I see that. I see the GrrCON stats where people keep writing bad code. I'm like, you guys are killing me. We have security awareness, folks. Why do you not get this? Do you know what else it is this month? It's National Pizza Month. 1 in 4 people use MFA. 3 in 4 people eat pizza every couple weeks. Why do they get an awareness month? They are stealing our awareness, folks. This is bullshit. But pizza's good, right? We like pizza. Pizza's tasty. It's an enjoyable experience. I would challenge you to make your security awareness as enjoyable as pizza. And not by giving a pizza, that's a cop-out. We all do that. All right? So that's how we go ahead and make an inhumane nightmare. There's my contact information. I'm out of time. But in sum, design better. Be kind to the good guys. Be inhumane to the bad guys. Add steps to them. Shrink steps to the people on our side. The end. And thank you, GrrCON.